Okay, here's a review of wedging this one right here with just the straight forward and backward forward motion and kind of rocking the clay backward. That is ram's head wedging. If you're doing it right, it should look like that. When you're doing this kind, you need to rotate your direction of the clay every now and again so that you get an even mix all the way around. Spiral wedging, which is use your dominant hand and on the bulk of the clay, your left hand or subdominant hand over here on the side, and push like so with both hands, a very slight rotation. If you're doing it right, take a little mark right there, wedge a couple of times and it's moved a little bit further up, wedge a couple more times, it's up here at the top, wedge a couple more times, and it's mixed down through here and it will continue to spiral around, hence the spiral wedging. This way you do not need to stop and adjust and change directions because it automatically mixes it all the way up. It also, your last couple of wedges, you make that tail a little bit smaller by rotating a little further. Go like that, and the bottom is without dent, and you can go and toss that right onto the wheel with, and it's pretty much ready to go. So it's a little bit better that way. What we're going to do today is start your coil projects. They do not need to be pottery. They can be sculptural forms. You don't even need to have coiling be the primary construction method as long as you've done several coils and you've smoothed them out appropriately. So take a small ball of clay to review pinch, which is how many of you are going to start this. Pinch, stick your thumb in the middle of the ball and start pinching as you go around. As you go around, watch for cracks. Smooth them out as you go before they get too much wider. See, that one got a little bit wider. If your clay is soft, it will be it will have less cracking involved and less likely to crack and split all the time. If you're getting a lot of cracking and splitting, your clay is a little bit stiff and dry, which lowers the plasticity of the clay. And plasticity is something that you need to understand about clay. The term plastic does not, when we think of it, it's referring to this stuff, right? Made out of plastic, that hard, flexible stuff. But this kind of plastic was called plastic because when it's heated, it is very plastic and moldable. If you take a piece of clay and you press on it, it stays pressed, right? You put a dent in it, that dent stays there, that's plastic. If I pushed on it and it popped back out, that would be elastic. And when it's, which is a similar term, the opposite of plasticity, you try and push on it, if you push your thumb into it, it shatters. That's rigid, that's kind of the opposite of plastic. More or less plastic can be determined by the ability of it to bend without breaking. So if you take a coil and you start bending it, it will go to a certain level before it breaks. This clay is a bit drier than the clay I'm working with, so it's less plastic, more likely to break. You can see all those cracks happening along there. You know, they're going to continue until one of them tears right through. And so that's lower plasticity, and that's simply because it doesn't have as much water in it. Your clay also gets more plastic as you let it sit, so if you've got the recycled clay, it hasn't sat for very long, up to like a couple of months or a year makes it more plastic. I think after that it doesn't really matter much, but if it's only been sitting there for a week or two, that's going to be less plastic than something that's been sitting and allowing those the clay to settle for a month or two. Is going to be more plastic. So the new clay is going to be a little more plastic than the recycled clay just by nature of it having been recycled recently. So if you make a little pinch pot and you're going to make this into a bottle, You want to add some coils, so you take a piece of clay, do something like that to it, and then you're going to start rolling it out. If you can fit both hands, great, but if not, start with one hand here and then roll yourself slowly over that one direction or the other. If you're getting a lot of those wrinkles, that means you are pressing it flat and then rolling it back up, which folds those pieces back in over on themselves. That can be a problem because it creates weak spots like that. You dry out the clay as you're rolling it on the canvas or plaster or whatever, and then you get that dry clay on the inside. It won't stick as well. The clay needs moisture to stick well. When the clay is really plastic, you just press it, and you press two pieces together and they're going to stick. You try and pull that back off and little pieces are going to come off. You can't find where that seam was. This clay that's drier, I pull those apart and they come away clean. That means in order to get these to bond, I needed more moisture and preferably a little bit of scoring. So slip and scoring. The moisture is slip and score. Moisture is mixed with clay is slip, and scoring is scratching into the surface. We score because if you put things together like so, only the adhesive, which is the slip, is going to be holding them together. If you put them together like that, you've got the adhesive plus the friction of the greater surface area. And we'll do the same thing when we attach our coils. So, these coils should be as even as possible. So if you start out in the middle and slowly work your hands over here, lighter pressure and a little bit of stretching. The heavy pressure is what makes it go all flat. If nothing else, start with light pressure and then you can get to heavier pressure as you are starting to go, so that you don't end up flattening your coil. That's usually where you flatten it the most, is right when you start. So you take your coil, fairly plastic, it'll bend reasonably well. And then most teachers will say to slip and score. You grab a bunch of slip and you slather it on there. And I've got slip in jars, which you can use. And then you get your needle tool and you cut big gouges in there, or something like this, a serrated rib, and make a bunch of cross-hatching marks. So you have to do this whole process, and then you add slip to that, and then you add them together, and that's how you make it stick. When the clay is soft like this, it's unnecessary to do that much work for it. So I have you use a toothbrush, and you get the toothbrush wet, you've added moisture, you rub it across there, you've mixed that moisture into the clay, creating slip, at the same time as you're scratching the surface. So you're scoring and creating slip at the same time, and you're creating the slip that is right off of that surface, which means it's going to match the clay body as closely as possible. I mean, it's going to match it perfectly, and so that's going to be beneficial. Then you can kind of just scrape along here, add a little bit of moisture. This is very plastic. Even as much as I did there was a little bit more than was absolutely necessary. Now here at the end, again, because of the surface area, this is lower surface area, this is greater surface area. So we take that and angle that part there, pinch this one off at an angle also. If I feel like it's necessary, add some there. As it dries out, it will be necessary to thoroughly slip and score. If you put two things together and you say, hey, are these attached? Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to tug on one. If it comes off like that, then you did it wrong. And if it breaks during the firing and comes apart and you're like, oh, it's just bad luck. No, it's not bad luck. There are no scratch marks in there. It came away nice and clean. If it breaks like that, then that might be bad luck. If it breaks where you put it together, then that was improper joining. In addition to slipping and scoring, the third thing you need is compression. So, for proper joining of clay parts, you need slip or moisture, you need scoring or maximizing the surface area, and compression. Pushing that clay together enough that it's going to bond and mix. Okay, compression is the squishing part. Okay, add a coil. If you're feeling like that you don't need to score it because it's so soft, but you need just a little bit of moisture, you can just wet down the coil, and that's often plenty. It's better if you wet it down and you rub back and forth a little bit there, which just creates takes that moisture and turns it, that water, and turns it into slip, a thin layer of slip. If you want this to be going outward as you go up, then you make it a little bit longer and have it hug the outside edge. If you want it to go inward, you do the opposite, shorter on the inside edge, or if you want to go straight up, you go right on top. You can also control the shape that it's going by the way you compress and pinch it together. So, done that. Looks like I have a little less clay than I need right there, so I can just grab another little piece, add it onto there, and I'll blend that in. Okay, so press there. The problem without scoring it, it does slide a little bit until I've given it some good compression. Okay, so I can still see these coils at this point. I usually do 2 or 3 layers, maybe a maximum of 5 layers before I start smoothing it out. I don't like my surface to be quite so slick when I start smoothing it out because I want to be able to grab that clay a little bit better. When it is slick like this, I can use a rib and slide the rib back and forth. So we go side to side, up and down. And so when I'm going like this, I'm bending it to match the shape. When I do this, I'm making that nice and even, supporting the shape from the inside, so that's compressing it, and you smooth it out until you can no longer see those coils or edges at all. Then you do the same thing on the inside. This one you're going to grab and turn like that. You can use the end and kind of flex up there, and that will smooth the inside. If it's smaller, your fingers will do just fine. But you can blend this until you can no longer see that. And then take a second and to see if your attachment is good, grab it and start tugging. And if it stretches the clay before it tears the coil apart, then your attachment was good. And you can go and just fix that. If it pulls apart, then you did it wrong. And it's better to redo it now than wait until it falls apart later. Okay, so there you're adding coils to this. So that's to do a bottle. I would go up. For a while I'd go out, and then I'd start making smaller coils, hugging the inside, in and in and in. If I make all of these coils before I smooth anything out, I won't be able to get inside to smooth the inside. So I need to, every couple of layers, smooth inside. Never go deeper than you can reach to smooth with your fingers. Or, like a potter's knife, you could use your potter's knife or other various tools for smoothing that out, but you want to smooth that. If you end up with one side taller than the other, you can just add a coil to the part where you need it. You can spiral it up if you want, or do it one layer at a time, which is how I usually do it. Either works fine. If you spiral it upwards, then you're going to end up with something uneven, and you'll need to fix that and even it out either by removing stuff, which you just added, or adding stuff to only the one side where it's short. If you're trying to do a form that's fairly complex and needs to be symmetrical, like a bottle, then you'll want to do make some sort of a template. So you sketch out your design and you say, so the bottle shape I want kind of comes in around and then comes up like that. And I want it to just be straight at the top, not flare out at all. Or maybe I'll flare it just a little bit. Okay, so that's the profile of this piece. And so, oh, looks like I'm not going out nearly far enough. Well, maybe I'll adjust my template and have it more like that. Okay, so that's more like it. I still need to go out a little bit. And so that way, when you pinch, the natural thing for pinching is for it to go outward. If you want it to go up and not go out anymore, then you kind of roll your fingers in and push them together a little bit as you pinch. So you're basically doing a little bit of this thing, which is extreme, each time you pinch. So there, and I can't see all of those wrinkles, but you can see it going in. Or I do the opposite, and there it's coming out. So that pinch method is used on the coil part of the project as well for shaping it and whatnot. Most projects that show the coils look like crap when they're done, and we have plenty of crappy pottery out in the world. Let's not make any more. If you're going to fire this and keep it, you might as well make it look good. If you want to use coils as a decorative technique. You can add some other coils onto the outside, and then you won't have to worry about structure, or you can do a little bit of coil decoration stuff at the top. But don't just try and add coils and say, oh, well, I wanted it that way because it's more decorative. I want you to prove that you can smooth things out and create a controlled form using coils before you use it as a decoration technique. So you've got that sort of a thing going on, and you can go out and back in. If I didn't want this to be a bottle or something functional, this could be the beginnings of a head. So I go and I change this shape just a little bit, and this could be the top of somebody's head. And then I come in here and I'm going to make some, eye sockets, which that's pretty high up. If this head was going to be a normal one, this would be more for a cartoony one. If you're doing something realistic, eyes go directly halfway down the head. So you could do that, and you can go ahead and add coils that way, or you could start from the bottom and build up with coils, and you can make whatever kind of a shape or form. It could be a head, and I would later add ears and other details to this, but your pot or sculpture, they need to be hollow. You can't have anything over about 1/2 of an inch, and you don't want anything over 3/8 of an inch where you can help it. So you need to be controlling your thickness. If it gets a little bit thick and it's a sculptural thing, and it's not something functional, so you don't have to worry about weight, then you can perforate it, stab it a bunch with your needle tool, and that will allow the moisture to escape to the inside hollow spot. And make sure if you have an enclosed hollow spot that you've got one little needle hole somewhere to let that air vent out. Otherwise, just leave the bottom open, and you could make your little sculpture like that. So please don't feel constrained to make a crappy ceramics piece when what you really want is to make an awesome caricature of yourself or your little sister or whatever it is. You can do whatever you want. It needs to be about 6 inches big, which means tall or wide, and it needs to use at least 6 layers of coil. So I used 2 layers of coil, and I used about 4 more. It would be at least that tall. And then if I wanted to close off the other side with another pinch something because of what I'm making, that would be just fine. You could also say, I want this to be a unicorn man, and coil build a little horn coming out of the top or something. So you make a thin coil, and I'm not slipping and scoring this now, just giving you the basic idea. And you start building this horn thingy coming out of the top there, and you make it big enough that you can fit your finger inside there, and then you come out and build that. That would work, or like Viking helmet would probably be much more interesting than a unicorn man. So, keep adding coils there until, again, I would normally be smoothing this out and going through that whole process, but just for the general idea. So that would be enough coils, even if you made the rest of the thing solid. If you made 2 horns out of coils and smoothed those all out, and you showed me that you understand coil method that way, and the rest of it you sculpted solid, cut in half, hollowed it out, and stuck it back together, totally fine. This all by itself, not a project, not 6 inches big, or as complicated as what other people are going to be doing. So you can do a little tiny thing like that, but then you better do 2 or 3 others in order to make up the points for the rest of the points for the project. So that's kind of your basic tutorial. Sweet.